Hello and welcome to the Lambda Cartel podcast. I am your host, Pablo Rivera. With me is Rick Pack. Rick is a data scientist, a software developer who sometimes toys with F#, and he is also the advertising commando at Impact Consulting. That's not the way I told you I was going to mention it on the air, but I think that's a very good description of what you do there. You use your analytical skills to leverage social media advertising, and so that I think turns you into a commando, sort of a guerrilla marketer of sorts. So this is going to be a really fun episode because we're going to cover. We're going to delve into data science, which is something that we haven't really talked about at the Lambda Cartel. So, Rick, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Pablo. I'm happy to be here. By the way, the name of the business is Impact Squared Solutions.
Oh my God!
It's PACK, like pack your bags. But hey, no problem.
I always mess up something at the start of podcast. If that doesn't happen, it's not the Lambda Cartel podcast. So, you've been a data scientist for how long?
Well, that's a funny thing. I started out in the industry after grad school as a statistical programmer in the pharmaceutical industry. That profession might be called data science by some employers today. Data science is a new phrase. Melinda Thielbar is a very well-known data scientist in our area. She leads the research triangle analyst, and so she presents sometimes, and she'll make a comment about how data science is the new phrase. It seems that the broad spectrum of professional roles that mixes statistics with programming has changed names a lot over the years. And bioinformatics, sometimes just data analyst, and no one can give you a clear distinction between any of these. The definition is dependent on the HR department. But with that said, if we keep our definition of data science broad, I've been doing it since 2008. I was in pharma for 5 or 6 years, did a stint with the CDC, and went to advanced auto parts for a little while. That was not for me. Now I'm back with LabCorp, back in the health sector and having a good time.
Wow, 2008. That's almost before Facebook came out. So you've been at it for a while, and you are pre-hype, pre-ML bubble, pre-artificial intelligence, 3.0 bubble. So yeah. that does give you a really good outlook at what's currently going on. And I mean, we were mentioning before we started that there is a lot of hype going on. There's a lot of people just using the term to close deals and to sell dreams to companies. I know that one of the problems is that there's a lot of snake oil salespeople that sell big data solutions and machine learning to places that can't even call themselves small data. So as a data scientist, as someone who works in that branch of software, where do you see this moving towards?
I think we're going to hear more from actual data scientists, because there's going to be a demand for a realistic take on what can be done given the technology and algorithms that are available, and the reality that data are generally messy. And so expecting an algorithm to process a bunch of data and give you something meaningful, well, that's just not always possible.
Mm-hmm.
And it also is partially a product of how well the problem is defined. So say in the health sector, I know that there's been a lot of controversy around genetics research. I'm saying I'm sure US dollars went into this, but I know Craig Venter is one of the leader, at least was one of the leaders in genetics research. Lots and lots of funding went into that research. And I'm not an expert in this space, but my understanding is that predicting disease based on genes has just not worked well, except for very rare, highly correlated diseases that are highly correlated with certain rare genes. You know, that's about it. I actually did a self-reported genetic test, one of those tests where you spit in a vial and send it off. And so I get these health reports, and I mean, they're not they're not all that accurate. I would say they're accurate about some things. Well, so it predicted that I would be a sprinter. Well, okay, but like the percentage, I think there was a 60% chance that I would be a sprinter. That's accurate, but of course it's going to be off 40% of people, let's say. So it's not something that you would want to use to predict much of anything, and that's not even a health outcome. The health outcomes that it looks at are very rare genetic diseases. And, I can't remember what that phrase is, but like I said, diseases that are highly correlated with certain genes. And my impression, and you know, an expert might comment otherwise, but my impression is that there's just not a whole lot you can do with that data, because so much of our health is a product of so many variables of which we probably aren't even aware yet. How many nutrients in our foods have we not even discovered yet? EMF radiation, how close of friends you have, what's your support network like? That helps your health, and your spiritual beliefs, so many things. So that just gives you a sense of how dirty these data questions can be, how not dirty, complicated they can be. And the next issue is dirty data. So a lot of times human beings are entering in data, so you are going to have names that are spelled differently here and there. People have different takes on how to measure certain assessments, and so on. So it's a complicated topic, and hopefully we'll see more data scientists speaking to the engagement of those topics in a highly publicized way that people will slow down in making high investments before they're confident that those investments will yield better outcomes.
So in a way, we could say that we are in the dinosaur phase of data science, back when dinosaurs were roaming the earth. You know, like prehistoric. There really isn't a lot of actual science. I don't want to, well, that's not the correct phrasing, but there's not a lot of hard data, and there's not a lot of historical data to go with, because the field is, you know, it's rather new as a result of software itself being new. So do you think, I had this, while you were explaining, I had this vision that people use data science because of what you explained, that there's really you know, a lot of factors that we currently cannot measure, and we don't know how to measure, and we're not really doing any or approaching this in a scientific way, because the processes that we need to establish and a lot of the theories, they haven't really been developed, right? So can we say that people could be using this sometimes as a sort of like one of those ghost hunters TV shows, where they use like multimeters and and this weird you know, digital gadgets to measure if there are ghosts or not? Is that something? Do you think that there's some data scientists operating like that these days?
Well, it seems that way, but I have not been involved in work like that.
Absolutely.
So let me talk about what I know. I was being overly negative because I was thinking about all the hype, but I have worked in predictive modeling only in one of my positions, maybe with the CDC a little bit, but we were doing a good job. We were helping people to make better purchasing decisions because of the predictions that we were developing.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a lot of trial and error, trying different models and seeing which one works. That can feel unscientific because you might look at the way data are distributed and make certain guesses about what is going to work, but it ends up being trial and error. I've heard that said by other data scientists. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's part of science as well. You know, a lot of discoveries get made by accident. So
exactly, and you know, science is just the study of nature, and so you know, you are studying the nature of data, the nature of health. You know, how that applies to how can we take that data and you know that we currently have about health, and how can we process it through our computer in a way that gives us an insight into you know a better prognosis for patients and so on and so on. So I think that discovery period is definitely a part of science, and it might not necessarily follow the scientific approach, the scientific model, but that's okay, because before we were able to explain fire, we had to learn how to make fire, you know, and we had to burn our fingers.
Yeah, that's right.
And so, you know, and so it's good. What I don't like is that high, because like everybody, it seems that everybody and their mother is running TensorFlow on their mobile app for reasons that I really don't get. You know, there's a lot of hype in getting machine learning and getting all of these models going on for reasons that I mean, it doesn't, for me, it doesn't make sense, because it does not bring in or it does not impact the bottom line enough to be worth it. And including something as complicated as TensorFlow on, you know, on your app or your SaaS or whatever software product you have, it's not easy to do, and it's not cheap. So I don't think that most of the time the investment it's worthwhile.
Well, so, you may know more about that than me. I actually am more of the I don't know position. I'm looking at headlines and can Watson save IBM? My belief, and I saw a headline earlier that was more powerful than what I'm looking at now, but my understanding is that there are some big wins that have been occurring in the way of artificial intelligence. Of course, self-driving cars is an amazing example. And, you know, it could be that next year at this time, we'll be amazed by our understanding of how much AI is affecting our lives and why it does make a business sense for companies to explore data science more deeply.
I mean, it's currently impacting us. I'm sorry to interrupt you, because you said how much it's impacting us. I mean, when you go to the supermarket, the food on the aisles, we cannot say that comes from machine learning, but that comes from certainly a more prehistoric approach to it, right? An older approach to what product do we stock there, you know, on what shelf. You know, we stock the cheaper products down below, we stock the higher priced products up above. You know, what colors do I want on that cereal box? All those things have been happening for a long time. It's just that we are trying to automate it and add a huge amount of fuzzy logic to it, you know, now at 2017.
Yeah.
So a sort of AI or machine learning or a statistical approach has been impacting our lives already.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So I'll tell you something I've been thinking about. I would like to see a lot more discussion of the ethics of the use of these algorithms.
Yes.
What may be happening is that those with a history of making certain purchasing decisions, for example, are getting better deals on certain products? Or what if they're being steered towards healthier products is that okay? Is it not okay? I'm not going to comment on that right now, but as these algorithms have so much more of an effect on the world as we see it, well, we better talk about how people are being differentially impacted by their perception of the world. Otherwise, and this of course is timely, otherwise we're going to have people that can barely talk to each other because the information that they have consumed has contributed to such different senses of how the world is.
Mm-hmm. And you can see that right now on social media, since you work since you are the since you are the one half of the advertising arm of the Impact Square Unlimited or Limited
Solutions.
There we go. See,
maybe it's not a good name.
No, it's not that it's not a good name. It's not a good brain right here. So since you do advertising there, I'm sure that you've seen that. I'm sure that you've noticed how Facebook tailors, their application not only to the consumers, but when you buy advertisement on Facebook, you are being gamed like a horse at the races. Like, they have this, they bombard you into buying $5, $3. Hey, let's boost this post for $4 and reach 2,000 people. And that's pretty much AI gaming you, because they have automated that to a point where it runs automatically. Have you noticed any patterns while working with the Facebook advertising GUI from the point of view of a data scientist? Have you noticed anything in particular?
Well, I'll say some obvious things, and then we'll get into why I'm working on an R package. I just have not had much time to work with it, but it is an R package to help me make sense of the data that you do get. First, it's hard. You do not get the kind of I wish one could, as long as it was ethical, get more data about the people who are responding to your ad. Pardon me. You get a person's. You can certain measures like link clicks. You can get their age, gender, where in the country they are, and that's about it. That's all that's coming to mind right now.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
So as you're thinking about the text you write, as you're thinking about how to better target your ad with respect to the various targeting items you can identify in the you call it, I get my terminology confused, in the interface. What do you call the Facebook Ads Manager? An interface?
Yeah.
Yeah. So as you think about the different options you can select, from marketing to certain marketers like Grant Cardone, to money, certain brands, and so on. It would be great to get a better sense of which one among a group, say, people are responding best to, but you just cannot do that unless you spin off another ad separately and have it targeted to only one target. But then, what if that ad is distributed differently from the other one? That's how I think about these things. I'm looking at distributions and I'm saying, okay, I created two ads, but one is largely going to say Texas and California. Another is largely going to New York and Florida. Are these really comparable? So it's been an exercise in humility and accepting that I'm not in control.
Absolutely. There's no way to run a real A/B test on Facebook, and that's something that I know. That's a fact. You have to run a campaign on Facebook that an inbound campaign that means that you create an ad and then you have people visit a link, and when they visit that link that you provide, that's when they enter your funnel. That's when you can actually do a real A/B testing, because you can have a control group and you can see like the different decisions that people do. But Facebook, I believe that that's done on purpose, because if they gave you real A/B testing, if they gave you real access to the raw data, their sales numbers would not be as good. Their stock price would not be as good, because then statistically speaking, it wouldn't show a marked improvement, because anybody who does a fair amount of Facebook ads or ads on social media knows that they are gained by click farms. They're also gained by the platforms themselves in the ways that you described, and they don't really offer a very straightforward interface, like you say. So, you mentioned humility, and I think that's the best approach when you try and do any sort of statistical measurement when it comes to advertising on using software platforms. Because otherwise, if you think that I know how this works, you don't realize, you forget that there's probably a team of 200 developers on Facebook pushing changes every 30 minutes to that algorithm. And so, assuming that you know how it works.
And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but they're changing the algorithm, they're changing the interface. Yes. I have had multiple days where something just doesn't work, and then it works again suddenly, and it's because they're tweaking it. And if I remember correctly, they give people different versions of the software. So I don't know if it's random or not, but some people are using a version with this feature, others do not have that feature, and they're doing those tests. And by not working, I'm talking about, I remember yelling. I'm so frustrated because if I click, I'll say it this way, if I clicked in a certain place after making a change to an ad, then the entire ad would just disappear. The window would close, and I would lose all my edits. And it almost had, depending on where you were in the creation of the ad, you had to do that thing if you wanted to change it. So, yes, I totally relate.
Yes, and and being a data scientist, being someone who values hard data, being someone who values having access to that hard data, I mean, I cannot even begin to imagine how frustrating it must feel to have such a platform. And like that's, I would just hand out flowers in a corner somewhere. I would just quit using Facebook.
I've thought about it.
So let's change gears a little bit. I know that you mentioned having tinkered with F# before, and here at the Lambda Cartel, we pride ourselves on trying to build correct software. That's our goal. We aim to build correct software, and we don't always, each of us individually, we don't always use functional programming, because every problem doesn't necessarily fit the functional programming model, right? The paradigm. But as a data scientist who has some experience with functional programming, and F# specifically, how do you see functional programming, evolving within the data science ecosystem?
Well, so the language I program in primarily is R, and I just Googled to make sure that what I was about to say is correct. R, Pablo, at its heart, is a functional programming language.
Okay.
And that makes sense because a lot of what I do in R is in functions. Not everything. I think that's true. Well, actually, in order to create anything useful, you have to use a function. I'm pretty sure. So that's what I know. Now, the other language I know very well is SAS. I believe SAS is called a procedural language. I might be wrong about that. and I could not tell you exactly what that means. So I'm not actually qualified to answer your question. I feel like I'm in a year of growth and humility from all this advertising, failed, well, not failed, but to large business investments that haven't worked out. Uh, I am realizing that I have a lot to learn, and that includes, as I've been listening to your Lambda Cartel podcast, understanding more basic terminology in programming. You know, my background is in political science and psychology. I was going to be a professor at the intersection of those fields, and kind of fell into data science. So, yeah, I'm not able to answer your question because I use R, and we just learned at its heart, it is primarily a functional language.
You know, that's interesting. I did not know that about you. I thought that you came from a computer science background.
No.
And that was silly of me, assuming that because, me of all people. So how did you, I mean, you say that you fell into data science, but did you ever program before that?
Some, mostly in SAS. I did have exposure to SAS in classes. I'm sorry?
No, go ahead.
So I listened to some of your last podcasts. So like you, I was on a Commodore 64 at a young age. I was very fortunate. My father bought it, and it was in the corner of our basement, just sitting there. It was still in the box. He hadn't done anything with it, if I recall correctly. My mother tells the story. And so, maybe I was 6 or 7 like you. I said, hey, can I try this out? And fortunately, they let me run away with it, and I would just type what was in the keyboard, in the instruction book. And really, it was more typing than programming because I was not actually thinking so much about what I was doing. But I did develop an intuition, I'm sure. I spent a lot of my younger years watching television, to be honest with you. So I look back and have some regrets about that. But I was a boy. What can I say?
No, I mean, I love to tell a story because it's a wonderful story, and I love telling people that I started at a very young age, and it's true. Like, I'm not exaggerating anything. I did sit down with the manual like you did, and I typed it. I didn't know what I was doing because I'm not Sheldon Cooper from the Big Bang Theory. I wasn't building a nuclear reactor in my basement when I was 7 years old, and I'm not particularly smart. So I was just typing the commands and developing what I call, muscle memory, and just going through the motions, and it was cool. It was like a video game. And yes, I then watched a lot of TV. I played a lot of NES. I played a lot of Super Nintendo. I played a lot of Street Fighter. But eventually, the amount of programming that I did led me to understand, to try and figure out how the characters in video games reacted to my actions. So I was trying to reverse engineering the algorithms.
Yeah.
And that's something that's the most valuable thing that I got from having that first computer, because I knew that if I gave the computer an input, it would give me an output. So if I gave the game an input, it would give me an output. And so it was just me figuring out which input gives me the output that I want. And so I don't think any of that is wasted. And I mean, television in the 80s and the 90s was pretty great. So, you're not going to hear me complain about that.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about what you do. I know that we've talked about you doing advertising and doing and working on that business. And I know that some people might say, what does that have to do with functional programming, with the Lambda cartel, or anything like that? But I think it's really important that we talk about that we talk a little bit outside of that scope, because listening about your experience as a data scientist, as someone who works with part data. And Facebook, it's something that, that I think it's valuable, and one of the goals of this podcast, it's not only to entertain, but to provide valuable content, and that comes through talking about different subjects. So what do you do exactly at Impact Squared Solutions?
Okay, when I am running ads, and that's almost every day, I look at the statistics and look at age breakdowns in particular. Sometimes DMA region, DMA is direct market area.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tweak ads based on performance. I write the text based on what my wife is saying. My wife is a star. If someone looks at my Twitter feed, Rick_Pack2 is me on Twitter. I have a pinned tweet of her talking in a video, and then if you click the link, you'll be taken to a Darren Hardy page. Darren Hardy is a very famous motivational person. He used to publish Success magazine. So you'll see her, and she's charismatic and pretty, and helping.
Yes.
Thank you.
I mean, I've met Ryan and Pack, Rick's wife, and wow, it's like meeting. It's like meeting. It's somebody. Like you meet anybody every day, but when you meet somebody, there's something right there. She's amazing. I wish someday to have her on this podcast and find a way to like relay her to them. I don't know. I don't care. I would love to bring her over, just to sit back and listen. But yeah, Ryan is just amazing. So continue.
Well, thank you. Thank you for saying that. She has that kind of energy. Maybe we'll call it star energy, I guess. I hope. So she records a video in her group, her closed Facebook group. Closed just means you have to request membership in order to see the content. Mm-hmm. And she sends out emails. You mentioned the funnel earlier, so she has a mailing list. She's emailing out career-related items, motivating items. And I would say she's still finding her unique voice in what's become a crowded market. People may not be aware, but a guy named, I think he's the source of this movement, a guy named Gary Vaynerchuk.
Yeah.
Wrote a book. I can't think of the title right now, but
Crush It.
And that made people think, I think this is part of postmodernism. I'm not sure, but that made people question the sort of sacredness associated with being a star. It helped them to see, oh, maybe I could be a star and I could get paid to do what I love. So when you see these advertisements saying you can get paid, do what you love, get paid to do your passion, well, maybe Gary Vaynerchuk is the cause of that. The market is crowded.
Yeah. And to add a little bit of, to add a little bit more to that. So Gary Vaynerchuk, he's a marketer. I don't specifically follow him. I've certainly watched some videos and I know about him, just because of my daily work. And he is a marketer. I think he is, from the last 10 years, I think he's one of the top 5 marketers out there, because he is a complete showman, right? He is about showmanship. He's not afraid to be on camera, and he's also very charismatic on camera. And he sells this message that that you should go and live your life to the fullest, because you're going to die, right? That's his message. Like, go and do it. And of course, he adds a lot of of additional stuff in order for people to get him to follow, and he sort of goes into motivational tangents. But he is a pure marketer, and he is what I call the new breed of marketers, where people started to realize that like you said, that you don't have to be a superstar. You don't have to be a movie star. You don't have to be on TV in order to become famous. It's like the only, it's like the only thing you need to do to become an author is to write a book. It doesn't necessarily need to be a famous book or even a good book. You can write a 3-page book and call yourself an author. So,
right.
so this all these new platforms that are coming, all of this software that we're building, YouTube and Facebook and WhatsApp and all those things and Snapchat, they're giving people the power to broadcast, to everyone. Like everyone can broadcast, whereas before it was just a limited amount of people who could broadcast. And I'm glad that you mentioned that, because when it comes to software, we have shifted. I tell people, I think that I told you this like 6 months ago. I think I told you, like, Rick, software is the new media. Like there's nothing else. Forget TV, forget radio. Software is the new media. And as developers and data scientists and people who build software and interact with software on a daily basis and at a lower level than most people, we right now have the ability to create not only platforms but entire ecosystems of communication, a communication exchange, right? Like a whole new medium. For example, here at the Lambda Cartel, we're building this project called Nikesa, which is being led by Scott Nemrod, and I believe you know Scott.
Yes.
And Nikesa is a platform that aims to simply tie in all of your content that is on different platforms and have it on one place. So if you publish a video on YouTube, and you tweet and you ask a question on Stack Overflow, everything will be there in one place, and people no longer need to follow you on different platforms. They can just follow you on Nikesa. They can see everything that you're doing there. So imagine now having that power, being able to access that data, and now this Nikesa takes back the power that, for example, Facebook took away from us in terms of analytics and data. And now we could be able to say, okay, so maybe I cannot do a good test, a good A/B test on Facebook, but now I can show the Facebook post on Nikesa and run analytics there. So there's a lot of potential there. And we're not doing it as a business. It's it's open source, but the idea is definitely brilliant.
So do your analytics in Nikesa. Now I'm curious how that might work.
So we, and by the way, we have about 10 minutes left. So it just has gone flying. Time has gone too fast. We need like a part 2, 3, 4, and 5. But I wanted to bring up Nikesa to you specifically because not only of your data science background, but what you do with advertising, and we're still not 100% there on how this will be achieved because Nikesa is being done as an open source project. It's not a startup. We're definitely not a startup. If anybody asks, we're not. But I realized the potential of being able to just funnel in all of the content from different platforms and have one generic place where you can, like for example, where I can follow everything that Ryan does on social media. Rather than go on different places, I can just go to my Nikesa dashboard and I subscribe to Ryan and I see everything that she's doing and I can interact with her. So imagine the kind of data that you can get by combining all the content that's being funneled in from all those platforms.
I hear you. Yeah, it seems like something that could be. It certainly would be very valuable from a consumer perspective to have one place you can go. I definitely see that. I wonder if Facebook and other corporations will. I just wonder how they'll regard this kind of aggregator. But hey, maybe they'll pay you a bunch of money.
We're not banking on that, but I know that this idea is always received with a lot of the people push back on this for obvious reasons, because you're taking away their business, and that's why this is like mostly an open source project. But it's the kind of power that as software developers, as data scientists, we have these days. Like we can invent. We can do like Scott says, from imagination to implementation. You can come up with new platforms, with new media platforms from one day to another, and change the course of the world if you're lucky enough.
Yeah, who knows what's going to emerge? Yeah, you could create something that ends up being more popular than every platform you're aggregating, and it becomes its own thing somehow. I think it's really cool. My understanding is Scott came up with this idea, and then did he reach out to you all, or did you all see that he was doing this and then get involved?
So interesting story. That's a good question. He reached out to us. He says, "Do you want to build a software, open source software?" And we all said yes. And it's been 2 months and change. And a lot of growth, a lot of personal growth has happened. A lot of things have happened. We're not only building an open source project that might, that some people might consider a product itself, but we're also building a team, and we're also building relationships. I personally only barely knew Scott Nimrod. I didn't know Adam Wright. I didn't know Mitchell Tilbrook or Odin Bebu. I didn't know anybody else, and it's like starting on a new software job and being thrown in and say, hey, here's what we're doing. So yeah, and that's how it started. And we're certainly, like every other team out there, like every other software team out there, we certainly have issues, and that's why we're documenting this process, and that's why I'm bringing people like you, so that we can have a certain another viewpoint of what we're going through. But we have our issues. We're not. I personally would like to be more organized, but that falls, I believe, on me individually. But this thing is getting shipped. Have you seen the amount of code that Scott is committing to this? He works every morning and every evening. The guy is just crazy driven. He's just like committing code left to right. So, I feel like I've served up. I think like I took a wrong turn somewhere in the conversation. This always happens when I talk to you. I think we click a lot together. I think we get along very well, and we always end up talking about 1,000 different subjects. But to summarize, we're talking about the hype surrounding data science today. You mentioned how you use functional programming, specifically with R, to do data science, and I think that's very important, because now we can definitely approach. We can definitely look into data science from a functional point of view. We talked about how different platforms are using data science and machine learning to try and to end gamification. to pretty much take the money from our pockets. And so we got 3 minutes left, Rick. What's next for Rick Pack? What's your outlook on the next 6 months?
Well, what I'm doing at LabCorp, I'm involved with a value-based healthcare initiative. And so what's on my deck is to be creative. I need to take the data that we have for patients and conceive creative ways of providing affordable care organizations, visualizations and analyses that help them help providers make better value-based decisions. So, for example, I look at, what am I allowed to say here? Let's say if a person is very, this may sound insensitive, but you know, the reality, let me back up a little bit. The reality is that in the United States, our health system is in crisis.
Mm-hmm.
We know, I think I saw earlier today, in 12 years, Medicare, I believe, I get them confused, it's going to run out of money. And if that happens, that won't happen. We're going to figure out a way for that not to happen, because if it did happen, then you would have people at the hospital begging and maybe becoming belligerent so they can get the care that they want. So there are some big problems that we have to face, and I'm very happy that I get to be involved with that effort. I am a kind of a problem solver, like a lot of people listening. I'm a problem solver, so I like to engage problems that I think are going to threaten the stability of our country or other countries as well. So that's what I see. I'm going to be reading a lot, reading more about some of the stuff we were talking about earlier, the advanced, more esoteric statistical techniques, because who knows what might help me provide something that's going to be of value. And it's going to be a lot of trial and error, and I'll be given an opportunity to do that experimentation. So that's good. As far as the business goes, we'll see. People, I've heard my wife, I do not listen too closely, but I've overheard my wife speaking with her clients. She is really helping people. So you have we talked about the attractiveness earlier and the charisma, but beyond that superficial element, she is very much of service, and that's her mentality, and it's mine as well. So as long as I see that we are helping people and we can afford to keep doing it, then that's what we'll do. Even her advertisements, I feel, are helpful because they are motivating for some, or they'll give a particular strategy that a person can use to help them in their career or business. And of course, I'll be listening to the Lambda Cartel and trying to figure out how in the world this is evolving. It's amazing. I'm looking at all of Scott's contributions and Odie, and it's a bunch. And
I don't know. I don't know. I always tell people I don't know how we made it this far. I really don't understand, because because we're all very different. We're all very driven, and we all live in different time zones. And it is an experiment. This is not like a guerrilla marketing campaign for a startup or anything like that. This is an experiment. I think if it's not the first of its kind, it's definitely one of the first, because we're leveraging every bit of media out there, and we're trying to reach people, and we're trying to not only show people that different different developers from different backgrounds can work together and come together and produce something, but that we can also share the process, because a lot of time, a lot of software out there is written behind curtains, because there is a certain level of shame of the process of writing software. I made a bug. I had to do a pull request at midnight because I forgot to uncomment something, I broke the build, you know, all those things. And so we're trying to bring transparency to that, so that people say like, hey, you know, like this guy's, they're doing that and they're not ashamed of that, and they're doing pretty well, and you can see, you know, how they are leveling up as they move on, you know. So it gives like every other regular developer, because we are all regular developers, there's no rock star here, it gives them, I think, a little bit of hope. And the only issue that I have right now is that we are five men, and that was just by coincidence. And I'm looking into making, and I wish to in the future to have the Lambda Cartel be, you know, not to have only male members, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, but in terms of you know, of demographics, we are all over the place. So we are unlike every software you know, team out there. So we are sadly out of time, and I wish I could go on more, but you know, we gotta let people you know, have some dinner and go to sleep. And I gotta let you go back to your pain and suffering with Facebook ads. But you know, but I know it's gonna be worth it. And I wanted to add just a little bit. You know, I do get, like I mentioned Ryan, I said like she's very charismatic, very driven, but she is definitely a person that she's transparent when it comes to caring about people, and you see that, and that's what I define as charismatic. Like, she's like, I mean, if you're listening to this podcast, you just gotta look up Ryan Pack on Facebook and on the internet, and just watch all of her videos. Like, don't take my word for it. She might not be your style. That's okay, but listen to what she says. Listen to what she says, because I listen to her videos, and it's just gold. So that brings us to an end. Thank you so much, Rick, for taking a little bit of time from your day. And do you have any short closing statement that you want to share with our audience?
Nope, I did not think of anything. Maybe next time I'll ask some more questions about what you're doing with the K-Zo. But this was fun. Thank you, Pablo.
All right. So that shows that you are definitely a scientist and not a salesperson, because I would have pitched something on that opportunity.
You just did it for me. You said look up Ryan Pack, you know, so you did it for me. So the proper salesperson position, at least in the way that I think of it, is to act humble.
Absolutely. That's absolutely true. So I'm just busting your chops. I love doing a podcast that is unlike every podcast out there. So, yeah. Thank you so much for being here. This has been Rick Pack and Pablo Rivera for the Lambda Cartel. Bye-bye.